Well, we are live. Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast. We have Brian Mclaren, who is a dear friend.
I don't know about you all, but it looks like I lost Jeremy here, so I'm going to guess he's going to be back. It's very nice to be introduced as a dear friend under any circumstances, and I'm a big fan of Jeremy's. And any of you who want to be listening to Jeremy, I'm a big fan of you. Looks like Jeremy's trying to get back with us here. Hey, Jeremy, welcome back to your show. I can't hear you yet. Now I can hear something.
You can hear me now?
There we go. Yes, there we go.
Okay, fantastic.
Welcome back.
The internet is a fickle friend sometimes. So welcome again to the Unbelief Podcast. We have Brian Mclaren. He is friend and conspirator and a public theologian, has written all kinds of books that have formed so many people, including me. And most of those books are nonfiction. But today we're talking about a book that just came out, and it is a fictional work. And I love that you are writing fiction. The book is called The Last Voyage. You can get it, wherever books are, wherever you get your books. I love it though, because for me, a lot of times when we're talking about reality, faith, spirituality, really any topic in a nonfiction setting is helpful and wonderful. But I feel like as humans, we really process narrative, right? Stories, and our lives and our brains resonate so well with fiction. And in some cases, I feel like some of the fictional books that I've read have formed me as much as the nonfiction that I've read. And I'm curious, before we just get into the book, what was the motivation to write a fictional book, which is sort of outside of your most of your catalog, right?
Yeah. Jeremy, I grew up as a kid wanting to grow up to be an Arthur. I didn't know how to spell it, but for me it was Erther, I think, and Arthur. But for me, I wanted to write comic books.
Yes.
That's what I loved as a kid.
That's awesome.
But when I started getting interested in reading stories and books and novels as probably a preteen, but especially as a teenager, I loved science fiction. Probably the first couple of books that really, brought me into a different world were science fiction. They weren't great.
What were some of those books? Just curious.
Well, one I remember, and I should say, I just picked these up in the library, and looking back, they were kind of pulp fiction. They were the kind of novels that authors churn out one or two a year, in a certain genres, because there's a big demand for series. But I remember one of them was called "The Stars Are Ours," and what a colonizing title, but that's what got me going. And then, of course, in TV shows with Star Trek and
Star Trek.
If you ever heard of the original Lost in Space?
Yes, I watched that. Danger, Will Robinson.
Yeah, exactly. And then, all through the years, my whole life, I can mark by the different science fiction shows and series and movies that have captivated me and fascinated me, along with books. So that's been a big part of my life. That in some ways predates any of my nonfiction. But about 10 years ago, I got the idea for this book, and and actually, yeah. So I've been working on this for just not as work really, but as play and
Right.
creative recharging and just something to keep
Hmm.
some amount of sanity. It's been a creative project for 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So, book is The Last Voyage. Give us the give us the 30,000 foot view. What is the book about in
Yeah.
general?
Okay. So, simple way to say it is it's science fiction. Science fiction tries to tell a story in a distant place, in terms of space and or a distant place in time. So this takes place on Earth in this book, but it's a group of people who are part of something called the Mars Colonization Project. And
Hmm.
this takes place 30 years in the future. What I
Right.
wanted to do is project current trends and try to say
Hmm.
if things go as they're going. And
Yeah.
in my imaginary world, 30 years in the future, oligarchs who have gained so much power in our lifetimes, more power than they've ever had,
Right.
in recent history for sure, and they are controlling government. So the world is really
Right.
controlled not by governments but by oligarchs.
That's
And
such a far-fetched idea.
right. Yeah, for people who are kind of politically savvy, I think, if I say the date 2010, they'll instantly say, "Oh, that's when the Citizens United Supreme Court ruling came out,"
Right.
which basically gave oligarchs unlimited access to political influence.
Yeah.
And of course, in 2016, when we elected a notable oligarch, uh,
Hmm.
and then elected him again, um, meaning a billionaire who wasn't content with billions of dollars, but wanted
Right.
political power along with it. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
imagine that's a special kind of person, but there are a lot of them in the world.
Hmm.
Many of them don't try to hold political office; they just try to get control of media.
Right.
So they can control people in other ways, not just control their money, but control people with their money. Um, so oligarchs have gained even more and more power. And what
Hmm.
happens, I guess you could say, the precipitating event in this story is that two oligarchs decide to team up because they feel the other oligarchs are driving us towards self-destruction. And
Uh-huh.
they decide we need to establish a colony on Mars that could potentially survive if oligarchs destroy the Earth. And
Right.
that's the story. This story begins when something has happened on Earth that makes these two oligarchs feel, and really they aren't oligarchs. We could call them philanthropists at this point because they're not trying to
Right.
control any governments or anything, but they
Uh-huh.
decide there's something has happened that is so serious. They had planned for dozens of voyages of about 25 people each, but
Hmm.
now something has happened and they can only send one more voyage. And something has happened on Mars that makes them say, we
Uh-huh.
need to send on this voyage not just people with technical expertise, but with people who pay attention to the human element. So,
Mm.
so this is a voyage where they recruit some artists, musicians, um, an ethicist, philosopher, theologian type who's aware of spirituality and religion,
Right.
and some people who pay attention to plants and animals because one of their theories is that human beings can't survive long term anywhere where they're separated from the larger web of life. That's the
Uh,
that's the setting for the story.
Fascinating. So, in a sense, humanity gets this chance to start over, really, right?
Well, one
Um,
way to say it is
eh,
it's an attempt to say if we wipe ourselves out on Earth, we
right.
need an assurance colony somewhere else, and it's sort of desperate, but planned by some very, very wealthy and smart people who bring together smart people because they really need this to succeed.
Yeah. I'm curious when you are writing the story, right? Humanity is sort of establishing itself for the first, like it sounds
Mhm.
like they're being intentional, right?
Yes,
What do
yes,
we need to do? What do humans need to exist?
yes.
And this is right in response to impending doom. So I'm so also, how do we have to establish this in a way that doesn't end there again?
Yeah,
Um,
that's
and I'm
exactly, yeah,
curious,
that's it.
yeah, I'm curious, uh, um, when we think about um, that kind of chance to restart, um, do we carry our old baggage with us, right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
how do you approach deciding which parts of like culture and politics and faith uh, come along for the ride with the people?
Oh man, there's the $1 million question, and there's the source of a huge amount of conflict among people on Earth and uh, people on Mars. You've nailed it. I, while I was writing this novel, which by the way is the first of a trilogy, so it's really a 3-book project,
Okay.
and the first 2 are written, and the third one's in process now. But I wrote a book called Life After Doom, which is a nonfiction
Right.
book. And in that book, I think there's only one person I quote 3 times, and that's an African philosopher named Bayo Akamalafe. And
Hmm.
Bayo Akamalafe says, what if our response to the problem is a part of the problem? In other words, what if our
Yes.
solutions bring along assumptions that replicate or perpetuate the problem? And that's
Right.
exactly what they begin to feel they've done in establishing this Mars colony, which
Hmm.
creates sort of a secondary level of crisis. And so uh, the kind of process of rethinking. A lot of people go through this in their theology. We call it deconstructing.
Hmm.
But there's a
Yeah.
parallel process that you don't just deconstruct your religious assumptions. Sometimes you have to deconstruct your economic assumptions or your
Yes.
political assumptions or your civilizational assumptions.
Uh-huh.
And that's the kind of thing that I think is really going on right now on Earth, and that I'm trying to explore fictionally through these characters.
Yeah, and that's I think what I love about science fiction. Like the
Mm.
power of science fiction allows us um to enter a world that feels new and alive and different and full of possibilities. And that sort of dropping away
Mm.
of our current context allows us to explore what it means to be human
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
what the human condition is.
Yes. Exactly right. This is a big part of what all of the best literature does, right? It
Right,
it
right.
it it creates this artifact. And this isn't just literature. I mean, it could be a poem, a story, a novel, a drama, a
Hmm.
movie, but it could also be a sculpture, or it could be an architectural work, or it could be a landscape design, or it could be
Right.
a musical composition. But these are all ways of us creating an artifact that gives us some distance. And in the
Hmm.
distance, we're able to have some reflection on what does it mean to be human? Not only what does it mean right now, when we look at past artifacts, we see what it used to look like to be human.
Right, right.
And when we create artifacts, we're imagining what it could look like in the future. Because,
Yeah.
if you think of it this way, the future is a different world. Um,
Right.
it, and so by creating alternative worlds, or in the words of Star Trek, strange new worlds, we're
Yes.
we're creating we're imagining different future possibilities. And this is
Yeah.
why uh, you know that I think we see this most clearly in literature in the word poem or poetry. A poem means something made. Uh, um,
Hmm.
but I think we understand that in the making of poetry, we are remaking ourselves, and we're
Yeah.
making our future selves who are influenced by engagement with this arrangement of words. And of course, that's what a novel is too. It's an arrangement on a different scale of words. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm struck by the fact that um, what you're saying there sort of makes me think about the fact that what fiction, really powerful fiction, Star Trek, some of the things that you've mentioned, um, does is it actually doesn't just analyze the future, it very much ends up shaping the future.
Yeah.
I used to live in Silicon Valley, and and so I was in conversation with all these people in the tech industry, and it was fascinating to me how many of them were trying to create what they imagined. A couple of them, particularly in Star Trek, right? The
Yeah.
computer that you could converse with, and just
Yes.
that sort of conversational interface. And literally, I had some conversations with people who were working on that. We now have a lot of that happening. Um, but they were like, wouldn't it be great if, like on Star Trek, we could just say, computer, make this calculation for me.
And here
And
we
so I'm
are.
curious, right? And I'm curious, as you look at this work, imagining
Mm.
the readers captivating, or sort of internalizing some of this. What is it that you see? Like, man, I can imagine somebody taking this little piece
Mm.
into the future and trying to make
Mm.
that a reality.
Yeah, yeah. Well, uh, the honest answer to that is I don't think in this book technology is the imagined is the
Right?
imagination is the challenge of imagination. I think
Uh-huh.
in
Uh-huh.
this book it's relationships
Mm-hmm.
and it is our own inner world. And
Ah.
that work of deconstruction and imagination. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just give you an example. One of the chapters in this book that was funnest for me to write. Uh, there's a main character. By the way, this book doesn't have one main character. It's a
Right.
crew of
Sort
10
of an
people,
ensemble cast.
and it's an ensemble cast. And but two of those 10 characters and two of the ones we meet early on are a daughter who is this young woman who's been recruited for this voyage, who is someone who's a lot like you, Jeremy, theological training, but also very deep
Right.
philosophical and cultural, and just a very wise person who's open to spirituality, but doesn't
Mm.
necessarily buy anybody's religious package uncritically.
Right.
Um, she has a father who is a hardcore scientist who also is on the voyage. His name is Colfax. Her name is Eve, and Colfax is like so anti-religion that
Yeah.
he just wants to squash any. He doesn't like this about his daughter, that she has
Mm-hmm.
this spiritual dimension. So they have some rip roaring arguments in the course of the
Mm.
book, and I'll just give you an example. In these arguments, they really hurt each other, um,
Yeah.
but they don't ever write off each other. And
Mm.
and in some ways, that like a technological breakthrough that I'm trying to picture, that might be something like a communicator or artificial intelligence,
Right.
um, or a transporter beam, is the ability to be in an argument and not leave the table when you're hurt, but
Mm.
or when you're offended or when you reach an impasse, but to sort of be willing to live with the hurt and live with the tension, and refuse to dehumanize and discount the other person. Um, and
Yeah.
I hope when people read a couple of those arguments, they'll realize that in the process of staying in there, there's one character who's clearly more wrong and one character who's clearly more right, but both characters grow through the story.
Yeah. Yeah. So, a lot of your work has been around spirituality. Um, and so I know that as you were writing this piece of fiction, that is in the center of your brain, because it can't not be.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, when when you bring spirituality into this setting, right?
Yeah.
Um, what what are the, I guess, contours
Yeah.
of spirituality that is in some ways unbound by some
Yes.
of what was on earth?
Yeah. So this is part of, I think, why my instinct drew me to create this whole narrative world.
Mm,
Because if you were going to Mars, you'd have three choices. If you were establishing a colony on Mars, you could bring one religion. You could say, let's make a Mormon colony on Mars, or let's make a Muslim colony,
right.
or let's make a white evangelical Christian colony on Mars. Um, uh, that's one option.
Right.
Nobody wants to do that. These billionaires who are
Yeah.
funding it, that's not the business they're in. Um,
Hmm.
Second, you could say, let's establish a culture where we have no religion. Let's find scientifically minded
Right.
people. And that's what the organizers of this colony decide to do. But,
Interesting.
but, 8 or 10 years into this project, they start to realize, oh no, there are some human needs that
Mm,
we are not accounting for, and they seem to have this spiritual dimension. And so now they're having to make a mid-course correction and say, we
okay.
need something, but we aren't sure what it is.
Mm,
And what begins to emerge over the first two novels, and then we get to see the fruit of it in the third, is a group of people who say, we don't want to resurrect one religion from the earth and act like it's got all the
hmm.
truth. We're in the difficult but necessary position of saying, if we were to look at all of Earth's religions, the good, the bad, and the ugly, what are the
Hmm.
treasures that we want to retain in some way, and why? And how do
Yeah.
we want to live them out? And
Yeah.
I have a feeling that's what, in some ways, all of us are trying to do. Like, I
Yeah.
know there are Christians who think that any insights from Buddhists or atheists
Right.
are wrong, but
Right.
I think for more and more people, they're saying, if I'm going to be a Christian, why would I want to reject any wisdom that Buddhism can give me, any wisdom
Right.
that agnosticism or atheism could bring me, any wisdom that Hinduism, which in some ways, is the oldest sort of world religion, and it's a case could be made, it's even a composite religion. But
Hmm. Hmm.
why would we want to miss any of that wisdom? So that's part of the
Yeah.
struggle that they're going to be going through.
Yeah. As you were talking about that, I'm coming back to really one of my favorite novels and series. It's the Ender's Game series. I'm not
Yes,
sure if
yes,
you're
yes.
familiar with that.
I've read them all. Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm struck by, so the first novel, which is I just can't. It's a brilliant work of
Yes.
fiction.
Yeah.
It's really exploring humanity's the way we wage war
Yeah.
and the way we sort of program people to lose their humanity
Yeah.
in war. Um, and then the main character, Ender, who is this boy, right, um, who is used to create genocide for an entire species, this invading force of aliens. um, he, there's light speed travel, so he ends up traveling close to the speed of light, so time slows down, and he writes a work telling the story of this alien species that has
Yeah.
died, and his pen name is Speaker for the Dead, and it's interesting to me because what happens in that fictional world is a sort of religion emerges around this idea of telling the stories of the people who've passed and
Yeah.
carrying those forward. I'm curious, as you are thinking here in spirituality, what part does that sort of um, embodiment of spirituality and the way that spirituality is explored and connected not just by our stories, but by the stories and the lives of the people that have gone past, that maybe we have experienced that in the past. What role do you see that playing in this world?
Yeah. So let me use a little moral aphorism that comes up in
Yeah.
just about all religions, which is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or love your
Yes.
neighbor as
Right.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's a morality of reciprocity.
Mm.
And reciprocity is quite a profound thing, because it says, in my egocentric self, I could easily say, I'm the important person. I am the star of the show. Everybody else
Right.
is a supporting cast for me. Or we could then take our group, our race, our religion, our nation, our
Mm-hmm.
economic ideology. We are the real humans. All the others are villains or allies, but we're the center of the story. And look, a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of humanity. That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think part of what we are struggling with right now. Well, actually, first let me say, your Ender's Game example I think is brilliant, because
Mm-hmm.
Ender is transformed when he empathizes for the species that he has made go extinct. He is committed,
Yeah.
not only, it's not just, yeah, it's a species side, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and when
Xenocide,
he
right?
Xenocide, yes. When he realizes that the xenos, the other, the stranger, the alien, that he has made the
Mm-hmm.
entire thing go extinct, he he has appreciation for their right to exist, and he
Yeah.
decides what he has to do with his life is to show the value of the victim of his own effort as a part of a larger civilization.
Right.
And and this sense of empathy for the other, seeing the validity of the other, a sense of reciprocity with the other, I think is part of our challenge. But here's where it gets even one level deeper.
Uh-huh.
Because I'm very concerned about not only climate change, but the larger problem of ecological overshoot. I think we're at a point in human development where we not only have to have empathy for the other human culture, but we have to have empathy for other species, and then empathy for
Yeah.
life as a whole. And that this
Mm.
sense of reciprocity is a radically different way of orienting our being. I think if I think that's more worthy of the word religion, a
Mm.
re-ligamenting, a re-situating ourselves in an environment of reciprocity, um, than anything else.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Uh, so when you think, I know this is a trilogy, when you think about this book, when
Yeah.
people read The Last Voyage, uh you know, this kind of stuff begins conversation and dialogue, especially when
Yeah.
people are reading it together, discover another person who's read their favorite book. Um, I'm curious for you as an author, what what conversations would you hope this inspires, this
Mm.
sparks?
Yes. Yes. Well, I first of all, so much of this book is dialogue. It's very much a book of interrelationships, arguments, thinking together. It's a very relational and dialogical, character-driven as well as plot-driven
Hmm.
story. So I hope what will happen is that people will realize that in certain ways, this fictional plot is part of the plot of our lives, and that these fictional characters render all of us characters in our own working out of this plot that's ongoing. So I
Yeah.
hope an identification, and then this sense that no one character has all the answers will help us have some sense. We each have something to contribute, but getting through this is going to require a level of listening that we aren't accustomed to, and a level of not only listening but of also speaking our deepest truth, and not letting it be easily brushed aside. I love what my friend David Dark says. He says, you have the right to not remain silent, and so having a sense that we have insights that deserve to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Brian, thank you so much for spending time talking about this book and for writing this book. I know that it was fun to do, but I really appreciate that and your time today.
Well, thanks so much, and keep up the good work, and thanks to everybody who's listened.
And so for our live audience, we've got a couple more minutes with Brian, and I'd love to open up the conversation to you. Many of you are very well aware of Brian's work in general, and so if you have a question for Brian, go ahead and put that in the comments. And we have our wonderful moderator, DJ. Shout out to DJ. Thanks for helping us. We're on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. And so yeah, if you've got a question, I'd love for you to post it in there. We'll ask Brian. I also recognize that there is a delay between when I say something and when you hear it. So Brian, I'm curious. When you if you had to recommend, you get sent an enormous number of manuscripts, right? I know that you read those. You read mine, and I was so grateful for it. What book is on your radar right now from another author that you're like, oh man, I really wish people would read this book?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh my goodness, there are so many good ones.
Yeah,
there are so many good ones. Let me mention three. My friend Caitlin Curtis, a member of the Potawatomi tribe of Native Americans, she has a new book that's just coming out, I think, any day now, if it's not just out, called it's got the word story. It's something like Everything is Story. She's a gifted writer and full of insight. Her most recent book, Living Resistance, another great book. Another friend, Christy Berghoff, has a new book out. It's a memoir. I think the title is either Home or Home is the main word in the title. I haven't seen these books physically. I've just read the manuscripts, and they're
right.
So good. And then you mentioned Ender's Game.
Yeah.
And thinking of the genre of science fiction, I'm reading a couple of books by a guy named Tchaikovsky. He wrote a book called Children of Time, and then a sequel called Children of Ruin. And these are very interesting books to me because Tchaikovsky is using his novels to try to imagine what reason would look like in a different species. Like, so one is about highly evolved spiders, and they have a whole social life. And the fact that they have 8 legs means they don't think in binaries the way we do.
Oh,
and the
fun.
fact that their main construction is a web means that webs frame their thinking. Anyhow, it's very fascinating, different world to read.
So we've got our first question. It's from Instagram, Melissa Collier-Gepford. Hey, Melissa, she's a friend of mine. She's got a question, totally unrelated to our earlier conversation about your book. But what are y'all seeing with young people that gives you hope? I'll let you go first on this.
Okay, so so I'll just tell a quick story. When my book Life After Doom came out a little over a year ago, I've been traveling around speaking about it a lot. And it's a book that says we have to take the climate crisis as part of a larger crisis of how we live with the earth, our basic relationship with the earth and with each other. And when older people read the book, they almost always say to me, wow, it was a tough read. It was really hard
Yeah.
to read that. Not that it was not well written. They're saying it's the content that I shared really shook them up. And then they, say it really meant a lot to me as an important book, but I almost put it down a couple of times because I haven't read a book that challenged me that deeply. Younger people
Mm.
say to me, the word that I hear again and again is they say, "What a relief." Because they
Mm.
say, I wake up knowing this every day, but it seems that nobody talks about it. And I'm so
Yeah.
relieved. And in a strange way, that gives me hope that I think more and more people, especially younger people, but thankfully some older people too, are awake to the realities we're facing. And we have to have awareness. James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be
Yeah.
changed until it's faced.
Mm. Yeah. I think for me, the things that gives me hope is in some ways the thing uh, that gives a lot of church people anxiety and makes them a little pessimistic. Um, this may sound strange coming from a pastor, but one of the things that gives me hope is that young people are leaving the church,
Mm-hmm.
and and that is because I feel like one of the core problems that has happened in religion, in Christianity, is this indoctrination, something I call inherited beliefs, where somebody just
Yeah.
gives you a belief system and you have to believe it. And the idea that has been sort of the standard for a long time that you you can't question those beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, it has to be very lightly, and 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 there's this sort of entrenchment that
Mm-hmm.
there is one right answer, and my experience with young people is that they will ask questions, they have questions, and when they ask those questions and they get that response, which again, I feel like that is one of the core problems that is ruining the religion of Christianity. When they receive that response, they're out,
Yeah.
right? They don't stay in the institution, continue to support an institution that is perpetuating that unhealthy culture, but they leave it, which I think sets off alarm bells for the institution, saying, "Okay, what's going on?" It causes them to rethink, evaluate, figure out like what are we doing that's causing them to leave. And also, when I talk to them, and they're part of my community, they're part of this presence that I have online. They leave the church, but they don't leave spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
They all are engaging in meditation practices or finding God in nature or exploring other religious streams. They are continuing to do that, and I feel like their exploration is has the potential to broaden what it means to be a religious person in the world. And um, as the institution begins to try to listen to their voices, they will hear a critique and a path forward that is different. Now, whether or not that is labels them a heretic or and sort of pushes them away, or this is the call of reformation. I think that um, that is the question as far as how the institution survives. But it gives me hope that one of the things that I see as a core problem that is undermining Christianity is being pushed back against in a way that I don't think it was in at least the recent past. I think when you look historically, there's definitely been times when people have pushed back very actively and hard. But yeah, that gives me hope, Melissa. I think we're going to have time for one more question. I see that DJ, our fabulous moderator, is trying to send me something right now. And here we go. The question says, when you started thinking about, this is for you, Brian,
Mhm.
when you started thinking about this book, what aspect came to you first? Like, what drove you to write? Character, story? What was the impetus? What was the imaginative spark?
Yeah. So here's how I think it went. We need to imagine a new way of living with the earth. But we're so caught up in all of the politics of people who are not imagining that. And so I
Mm,
thought maybe this a Mars colony could be the way this would happen. And so then what began to take shape is a story about a Mars colony being established, and then some things happen on Mars that force them to start asking some of the deeper questions.
yeah,
It felt to me like I needed a fictional situation where would become almost like a laboratory. And the
yeah,
thing I should also say is it's not like I have all these things figured out, and so I just put my
right.
ideas in different characters. It's actually the opposite. By putting myself in some characters, it's helping me think about things. How
Yes.
would this person, it takes me places I couldn't go otherwise. So I think
Hmm.
what I hope happens for readers is actually what's happening for me in the writing process.
Yeah. Well, Brian, thank you again. I really appreciate you on so many different levels, but from Mars to Earth, right? The Last Voyage, that's the book. It's fiction. You should go to wherever your favorite book place is. I will put a plug in for bookshop.org. It works like Amazon, but you select your local bookstore, and they're the ones who get the profits instead of an oligarch.
Yes, that's right.
And so, but wherever you find your books, that is where you can go to get The Last Voyage. Thank you again, Brian.